It was the summer of 1872, and the SS Pacific, a sturdy Canadian merchant ship, had embarked on its journey across the Atlantic, bound for the Mediterranean. The weather had been unusually calm for weeks, and the ship's crew had settled into a steady rhythm. The winds were favorable, the sky a brilliant shade of azure, and everything seemed to be going according to plan. Captain Edward Calloway, a seasoned navigator, paced the deck with a thoughtful expression, his hands clasped behind his back as he studied the horizon. He had seen his fair share of strange occurrences on the sea, but nothing had prepared him for what was about to unfold. As the ship neared the Strait of Gibraltar, just days away from entering the Mediterranean Sea, the air shifted. A heavy, unnatural stillness descended, and the crew began to feel an unease they couldn't quite place. The sea, which had been as smooth as glass, now seemed to ripple in subtle, almost imperceptible waves. It was as if something unseen was disturbing the waters. "Captain," said First Mate Gordon Blake, approaching with a furrowed brow, "there's something strange out there." Captain Calloway squinted into the distance. At first, he saw nothing but the expanse of water and sky. But as his eyes adjusted, a dark shape emerged from the haze on the horizon. It was a ship, but not like any vessel they had encountered before. This was no ordinary merchant ship, nor was it a warship from one of the European powers. The strange vessel appeared almost out of place, as though it didn't belong to this world. At first, the crew thought it was merely an optical illusion, a trick of the light. But as the minutes passed, the shape became clearer, and it was growing larger at an unnerving rate. The ship's sails, tattered and torn, billowed in the wind with an almost unnatural force. Its hull was dark, almost black, and it seemed to shimmer in and out of focus, as though it was both there and not there at all. "What in God's name is that?" muttered Blake, his voice tinged with disbelief. The mysterious ship drew nearer, its presence sending a chill through the crew. The captain's usual calm demeanor evaporated, replaced by a deep, gnawing dread. It was moving swiftly, far too quickly for the gentle winds that were supposed to be pushing the SS Pacific forward. As the gap closed, a whisper of panic began to spread through the crew. This was no ordinary encounter. They couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched by something far older than themselves, something beyond human comprehension. "Ready the cannons," Captain Calloway barked, though his voice wavered with uncertainty. "We don't know what's out there, but I want the crew prepared." But before anyone could respond, a sudden fog rolled in. Thick, dense, and suffocating, it blotted out the ship and swallowed the horizon whole. The SS Pacific was now drifting in an ethereal world where the sea and sky seemed to vanish into nothingness. The crew stumbled about, blinded by the fog, unable to make sense of their surroundings. Then through the fog came a sound, a distant, eerie song. It was haunting, melodic, and strangely familiar, yet alien. The crew had never heard anything like it before. It was a sound that didn't seem to come from the ship, but from everywhere at once, as though the very air was singing. "Where is it coming from?" Blake whispered, looking around wide-eyed. "Stay calm," Calloway ordered, though his hands were trembling. But the fog didn't clear. It thickened, and then the ship appeared. It wasn't the same one from before. This ship was wrong. There was no mistaking it now. It wasn't just an illusion. The ghost ship loomed in front of them, impossibly large, its sails sagging like rotting rags, the hull scarred and patched with strange symbols the crew couldn't decipher. No one stood aboard, but there was a sense of life, an ominous, suffocating presence that radiated from the ship like a weight pressing down on their chests. Without warning, the ghost ship loomed even closer, and for the first time, the crew realized they could hear footsteps. Heavy, deliberate steps, as though someone or something was walking across the deck, though no figure was visible. "Captain, what's happening?" Blake asked, his voice now trembling. Captain Calloway swallowed, his throat dry. "We need to get away from it. Full speed ahead." But no matter how fast the SS Pacific tried to sail, it felt as though they were locked in place. The ghost ship seemed to pull them in, tethering them to its ominous presence. Suddenly, a shadow moved on the ghost ship, and then it appeared. A figure emerged on the deck of the phantom vessel. Tall, gaunt, and shrouded in tattered black robes, the figure seemed to glide rather than walk. Its face was obscured by a hood, but its glowing eyes, pale and empty, fixed directly on Captain Calloway. "Captain!" The voice came not from the figure's lips, but as a whisper in Calloway's mind. "You are not meant to pass." The words reverberated in his skull, icy and sharp. "What do you want?" Captain Calloway shouted, his voice breaking through the fog. The figure did not respond directly, but instead raised a long, bony finger toward the SS Pacific's sails. The wind shifted violently, howling like a beast, and the sails snapped and tore, the ropes breaking with a deafening crack. In the chaos, the fog began to lift, revealing a dark expanse of sea and sky, the ghost ship now gone. Just as suddenly as it had appeared, it vanished, leaving the SS Pacific stranded, its sails shredded, and its crew in utter confusion. The crew worked furiously to regain control of the ship, but there was a palpable sense that something had shifted. The encounter with the phantom vessel left them shaken, and despite their best efforts, they could never shake the feeling that they had been marked by it. And then, the whispers began. Late at night, as the crew lay in their hammocks, a few of them began hearing the same chilling voice that Calloway had heard, the voice of the phantom captain. Sometimes it came as a low murmur. Other times, it was a sharp, menacing command. The crew members grew more and more nervous, afraid to sleep, afraid to speak of the mysterious encounter that had nearly destroyed them. As for Captain Calloway, he never spoke of what had truly happened that night, but he knew something had changed. The sea was no longer just water. It was something far more ancient, far more dangerous. No one aboard the SS Pacific ever spoke of that night again. But some say that on quiet, foggy nights, the ship sails on, eternally wandering the ocean, forever trapped in a ghostly limbo, chasing the horizon, but never quite reaching it. And the mysterious phantom ship, still out there somewhere, waits for the next ship that dares to sail too close. This is the story of the Flying Dutchman. The Flying Dutchman legend itself has long been tied to ghost ship folklore. According to maritime myths, the Flying Dutchman was a cursed ship doomed to sail the seas for eternity, never able to make port. The crew is often depicted as dead or cursed, trapped between life and death. This eerie concept has been adapted in countless stories, and its influence can be seen in movies like Pirates of the Caribbean, where the Flying Dutchman becomes an integral part of the plot, complete with a ghostly crew and a cursed captain, Davy Jones. But apart from the myths and eerie tales that inspired ghost ship stories, there's a far darker truth that lurks beneath the legends, a real curse that could haunt a man's soul, one that was rampant on the seas during the 17th and 18th centuries. That curse was called keel hauling, and it was the true curse of the sea. Keel hauling was not just a brutal form of punishment, it was an execution, a ritual so harsh it could leave a sailor's body broken and his soul forever trapped in torment. This punishment, used by pirates and navies alike, was designed to instill discipline, but its consequences were far worse than mere physical pain. To understand why keel hauling was so feared, one must look deeper into its savage nature. Keel hauling was a public punishment, one that would make even the bravest sailors shudder. A crew member found guilty of a severe crime, such as mutiny, theft, or desertion, was bound to a rope, thrown overboard, and then dragged underneath the ship's hull, where they would scrape against the barnacles, jagged wood, and sharp debris that clung to the ship. The violent friction of being dragged across the rough, barnacle-encrusted keel of the ship was enough to tear skin, rip flesh, and often fatally wound. The cold salt water would enter the lungs, choking the sailor, while his body was pulled violently beneath the ship, pushed from one side to the other, until either death by drowning or the destruction of their flesh left them incapable of survival. The physical agony was unimaginable, the skin being shredded to ribbons, the muscles being torn and battered by the relentless pressure, the sharp edge of the ship's hull scraping away at the very bones beneath the flesh. For the sailors who survived, they were left with mutilated bodies and a spirit forever tainted by the horror they endured. Keel hauling wasn't just a punishment, it was an affront to a man's very soul. To be subjected to such torture and humiliation meant more than the loss of life or limb. It signified a loss of dignity and a severing of the soul from the world of the living. Those who died during keel hauling were said to have been dragged into the abyss of the ocean, where the waves claimed them. But something darker followed them down. Their souls were forever bound to the sea, unable to rest, unable to escape the torment of their final moments. In pirate lore, the curse of the sea was a well-known superstition. The ocean was a vast and mysterious entity, a place where the boundary between life and death blurred. The souls of sailors who met violent ends, especially those who were subjected to keel hauling, were believed to become trapped on the ocean's surface, unable to move on, lingering in an eternal state of suffering. These souls didn't fade away like ordinary spirits. They were twisted by the violence of their death, their memories steeped in agony, and they didn't just haunt the places they died, they became part of the sea itself, caught between worlds, unable to break free from their torment. They were the ones who were said to return as part of the ghostly crews of phantom ships, doomed vessels that roamed the oceans, seeking other lost souls to claim and drag into the same fate. The idea of ghost ships is steeped in these darker tales of punishment and curse. Some of the most terrifying ghost ships are said to be vessels whose crews met grisly ends, those who were cursed by the sea through keel hauling, mutiny, or violent death. These ghost ships are not just ships. They are floating prisons, carrying the souls of the damned, forever bound to sail the seas. Each member of the crew, lost to the waves, is now a part of the ship's haunted, tormented journey. The ghost ship becomes a time capsule of death, sailing forever in search of other unfortunate souls to join its cursed crew. Those who dare to cross its path risk becoming part of its crew, forced to relive the agonizing torment of their own final moments on the ship's cruel hull. The ship itself, a symbol of their suffering, drifts through the mist, forever lost in a world between life and death, where time itself has no meaning. As these ghost ships roam the oceans, their crew lives on in eternal suffering, forced to relive their torturous deaths over and over. And for any sailor unlucky enough to encounter one, the curse may pass on to them, condemning them to join the ship's crew in the afterlife, an afterlife of endless torment beneath the cold, unforgiving waves. So, when sailors spoke of the ghost ships that appeared in the fog, drifting silently across the waters, they weren't just telling tales of supernatural phenomena. They were recounting the fate of those who had fallen victim to the most brutal of all sea punishments, keel hauling. The victims of this curse did not just die, their spirits were absorbed by the sea, their souls chained to the water, forever haunted by the pain and the darkness that had claimed them. And thus the ghost ship became more than just a story. It became the manifestation of that curse, a ship doomed to sail the ocean forever, carrying the tortured souls of men who had crossed the unforgiving line of the sea. In this way, the terrible punishment of keel hauling, with its cruelty and finality, is tied forever to the ghost ships of legend. It is the ultimate curse of the sea, a curse that turns men into restless spirits, bound to the watery grave that they never quite escape. So next time you hear the wail of the wind and spot a ship adrift in the fog, know that it may not be just a ship. It may be a ghost ship, carrying the souls of the damned, forever cursed by the cruelest punishment known to pirates.